Hello and welcome back to another out of spec detailing video. You join me today with a brand new Tesla Model Y Performance here at Clear Detailing. Now the big question I'm trying to answer in this video, has Tesla improved build quality overall with Model Y? We're going to be going in, looking at the paint, seeing how the paint is looking, do some paint readings as well, looking at panel gaps, seeing what's good, what's bad. This is a Fremont built Model Y Performance, so I'm curious to see, has it improved? This car is in for a full new car vehicle prep, getting full ceramic coating on the paint, trim, and wheels, and I can't wait to get into this one. We're also going to have a multi-part series on this particular vehicle of removing defects that we find, polishing the vehicle, as well as getting it protected pretty much from day one. So let's jump right into it. Very excited for this. All right, so here we are with the new Tesla Model Y Performance. Now, something kind of cool with this vehicle, this is actually a very good friend of mine's vehicle. As you guys may know, I own a Tesla Model 3 long range, and he really wanted to look into the EV world, and I kind of pushed him in the direction of the Model Y Performance. Just an incredible vehicle overall. Performance, you have plenty of space inside. So that was really, really cool to see him go with a Tesla. Now, what's kind of interesting, I've been in the background of the actual buying process of this because he was kind of going, do I go Model 3, do I go Model Y, what colors, interior options, and that. So he actually ordered a Model Y Performance with a black interior. And after he actually placed the order, I said, you know, that white interior is amazing, very easy to clean, and yeah, really, really cool. So what actually ended up happening is he was contacted by Tesla, I believe, or he reached out to them, seeing if they had any available because he traded in a vehicle and didn't have a car for the time being. It was going to be a couple months before this car would actually show up that he ordered. Funny enough, he found one down in Denver and it had the white interior, and he said, well, I think that, you know, it shows that I made the wrong decision with black, and I think he's loving the white interior on this. Also, just wanted to point this bad boy out here. Lucid Air at the shop today. We had done a full video over on the out of spec reviews looking at the build quality of that. So let's start off here. This vehicle is in the gray paint from Tesla. I have actually never worked on this paint. I have only worked on white and black Teslas, believe it or not. Pretty crazy. So I'm really curious to jump into this, see how the paint reacts to polishing and what kind of defects are on this. Now this is a Fremont built vehicle. I know that by looking at the VIN tag here, it shows an F. If it was from Austin, it would show an A in the actual VIN. So Fremont built Tesla. I'm very curious to see, how did all the panels line up? Kind of initial impressions, not too bad. This is a really striking vehicle. Everything looks pretty tight. I have seen a few issues that I want to show you guys, but the big kind of premise here is, what does it look like? All right, so let's start off on the passenger side, kind of show my initial thoughts. Now, first off, somebody's going to notice this. Yes, so this car had some curb rash done. My client was just absolutely gutted when this happened. Now, I do want to say the car's got about 1,200 miles on it, but he's only been driving this for about 2 weeks. So he's really driving this, enjoying it, getting used to the whole Tesla lifestyle. Very, very different, but he's really enjoying it so far. So I do want to make a note that any really, really deep scratches are not necessarily from Tesla, but they may have been, you know, after the fact. But I do want to point out anything that I see as far as if there's sanding marks, buffing marks, things like that, because he has not even washed this vehicle once. So we're going to talk through that. Now, already immediately looking back here, there's some really interesting texturing going on here versus over here. Now, I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up quite as well, but in person, this is far more orange peely textured than this quarter panel. I'll be curious to put a paint meter on here and see what that looks like. I'm also seeing a few little dust nibs here. I'm not sure they're going to pick up on camera. Let me try to. There's one right here and one right here. So kind of interesting to note there. Let's check out this side and see what it looks like there. Actually, this side looks a lot better. Coming down over here, now I'm just going to point this out. There is a small little dent right here. Not sure if that had something to do with the wheel. Can't put that on Tesla. Now, I have found a few things around this car that are kind of odd to me. So down here, there's a big kind of ripple here in the paint, and it doesn't look like a dent. Rather, it looks like an area that the panel wasn't perfectly kind of aligned. Now, we've also got a little fisheye here, we call it. So kind of a little paint defect here, a little dust nib here as well. I'm also seeing one up here. Kind of interesting. One of the pieces that I'm really seeing that does not line up at all is this fender here. So look at this body line, how different it is. And it's about, wow, maybe even a 1/4 inch off. This also doesn't perfectly line up. It looks like this needs to kind of come up a little bit. The doors actually fit pretty well here though, so that's good to see. But it definitely looks like that quarter panel's a little misaligned there. Now, I've seen a lot of Model Ys with this plastic trim being a little bit wonky. All of the sides on this look extremely, extremely nice. But again, I think there's a little bit, if you go around here. Now, I'll be the first to say, I personally don't really have a huge issue with panel alignment. If it's really off, I do. But like my personal Tesla Model 3 over here, it looks pretty darn good. There's a few things here and there, but I think it's kind of an acceptable tolerance. But I was just kind of curious to see how these cars are looking, because I know early Model Ys had some serious issues. Now, all of this black trim looks really nice and tight. Very, very impressed to see that. Also noting a difference here, there is quite a bit of overlap here on this panel. The end of the world, I don't know. Definitely pretty decent gaps along this trunk here. Those can be kind of tricky, and lining these 4 corners up. This light actually looks pretty good on the side. I'm going to show you the charge port over here, which in my opinion is not perfectly aligned. So we've got quite a bit bigger gap back here and then really tight up here. Kind of needs to do one of those. Other than that, I haven't seen a whole heck of a lot. This side looks pretty reminiscent of the passenger side of the vehicle, so I'm glad to see that there. What I haven't seen so far, and I haven't gone over this with the light, but I haven't seen any sanding marks, which I'm kind of glad to see. Overall, the paint looks pretty decent, but we're going to do an isopropyl alcohol wipe down just to make sure it's looking good. Before that, let's start and look at a paint meter with this. Also, I do want to quickly note this. So this is properly aligned on this side. Notice how much tighter that is. So a little bit of variance between those 2 quarter panels. I'm also noticing I can actually see the clips back here. So wondering if that needs to be pushed in a little bit. Again, one of those things, just kind of curious to see how this is looking. Let's stick a paint meter on this car. All right, so we've got our paint meter here, and I'm going to quickly show you what my Model 3 is. I'm only going to do a few spots. We're going to switch this over to mils. Now this is the Pearl Effect paint, so lots of layers on this, but it's kind of interesting to see 7.74 mils, so quite a bit of paint when you consider that the Lucid outside had around 3 in certain areas. So let's first look at this section here. 4 mils there and 4.45. So actually kind of glad to see these aren't too different. Just on average, so you guys know, typically right around 4.5 to 6 mils is an average car. So I would say so far we're looking pretty good and actually pretty consistent. 4.52, so remarkably consistent right now. I'm liking to see that when we're looking close to 6 mils, that is just fantastic. Let's look here. This is always an important area to have quite a bit of paint. Slightly lower, again, nothing that I'm kind of panicking about, but just kind of interesting to see how these are consistency-wise. A little bit lower in the middle of the door, but not too bad. Wow, actually that's a little low there on that kind of rear fender arch here. Let's see how it is up here. 4 mils, 3.3, so a little low down there. I would really prefer to have some more paint down here because especially this area gets really chewed up by the front tires up there. 4.3 mils. Let's go middle of the door here, 5.3. Yeah, kind of interesting. I think this is pretty average. Again, a little bit low on the side there. Maybe let's look right behind the wheel here. 4.7. I like to see a good amount of paint there. Now, it should be noted that we cannot measure plastic panels with this particular gauge, so I just want to make that clear. Let's go here in the middle of the hood. 5.26. Very, very nice. 4.0. Yeah, definitely a little bit of variance. Honestly, guys, it's pretty average on these vehicles. Nothing too crazy that I've seen in the past. Let's go here on the driver's side. 3.92. Honestly, slightly low. 5.51. Let's go up here. 4.93. It's really interesting to see how these cars are. And again, I've seen Audis, Porsches, Lamborghinis, anything. They all are kind of like this, that certain areas have more paint, certain areas have less. But yeah, just in general, this seems reasonably consistent. A few areas are slightly lower than I would like to see. So I'm kind of okay in the higher 3 range. When we start getting really low down to the low to kind of mid 3s, it does make me a little bit nervous for sure. Definitely don't want to be hammering on the paint here. Nice 5 mils back here. 4.52. 3.88. A little interesting there as well. So we're kind of, yeah, honestly, it's a little all over the place, but relatively consistent for vehicles. It's kind of hard because when they paint these vehicles, areas like this are very hard to get very even paint in here. Just kind of one of those things that happens. I'm also noticing another denibbing here. This is kind of interesting because on Kyle's Model S Plaid, a lot of those denibbing marks were actually gone. What they were doing was sanding those areas down, polishing it. So I'm curious to put a light on this now and see what the actual paint looks like, because it doesn't seem like they're doing a lot of sanding, buffing, anything like that on the car, which in my opinion, I would almost rather have a little dust nib than them go in there, try and denib that like crazy, just tear the paint up. Just, yeah, kind of interesting there. So I think next, let's get the vehicle pulled into the bay here. Let's get the SCANGRIP lights on it. Let's go over the paint, looking for any sanding marks. We'll definitely look for scratches, but again, we can't put that on Tesla because there is 1,000 miles on this vehicle already. But I definitely want to see if there's any like really weird imperfections that I can see in the paint. All right, so I'd figured we'd just take a look quickly outside at this and kind of get initial thoughts and feelings on the actual kind of paint quality, see if I see anything on there. First off, this is the first gray Tesla I've ever had in the shop. I've only ever had white and black, which is just kind of crazy. Wow, really looking at this in the sun and already noticing that I don't see a ton of scratches and swirl marks. I love to see that. So I don't see, you know, like tons of scratches on the hood, which I've definitely seen from Tesla. Now, the Tesla black paint that I've worked with is one of the softest paints I've ever dealt with. And that was on a brand new Model S Plaid. That was one instance, and it definitely changes between vehicles. So just something to keep in mind. But just in general, that was a very, very soft black paint. I'll be curious to see what this looks like when we start polishing it. Again, initially, I'm not seeing a ton here, which is the best case scenario. We don't want to have to necessarily compound all the time. If we don't have to, we don't want to, right? So polishing is probably going to be what we're going to do here. Now, outside, here's the thing, guys. When I use my SCANGRIP lights, the nice thing is that I can have a light source maybe sitting down here looking up at the paint. We only have one light source here, so we're using natural sunlight. But as it moves throughout the day, you'll be able to find and see more defects. But I just wanted to show you initially out in the sun. Honestly, looking pretty sharp. I'm very, very impressed, actually. Now, again, we're not going to exactly point out scratches around that area because there's definitely going to be some from my client getting in and out of the vehicle. But honestly, really impressed so far. Now I'm definitely seeing back here quite a bit of scratching and marring on the actual charge port door. This is pretty common. These kind of plastic essentially that they use on these are always extremely soft, definitely kind of tricky to polish out, but nonetheless definitely wanted to show that. Yeah, overall guys, honestly pretty thrilled with this paint. It looks pretty decent. That can just be some marks there you're seeing. So I think next case we are going to get this backed up into the bay. We're going to do a quick isopropyl alcohol wipe down, and we're going to get the SCANGRIPs out and go nerd level 9000 as Kyle calls it, and see what is actually on this paint. Because always what's kind of interesting, what happened on Kyle's Plaid, is that we washed the car down and looked at it initially and it was like, wow, it looks pretty decent. When it came back, I did an isopropyl alcohol wipe down and all this stuff rose out of the paint, essentially because the polish or wax, whatever Tesla was using on this, basically was taken off, hiding those imperfections. And man, oh man, was that a big detail. I think that was actually the first video we put on out of spec detailing. So I'll be curious to see, and hoping not to see, that if we do the isopropyl alcohol wipe down, we're not gonna see a ton of defects, but we're gonna go around the car in detail. All right, so we're now inside. I pulled it in the bay. I've done my isopropyl alcohol wipe down. I want to show you guys a few things I found during that time. Now we've got a little bit of a chip here. I would either assume from this moving or when it was actually installed, as well as right here, a little bit of not the greatest panel alignment where it's actually touching the paint here. I would assume when they put this window in, or that just that trim piece, that it caught a little bit of the actual paint there. Overall, I have yet to see any sanding marks. I am very thrilled with that. Overall, looking pretty good. Now we're gonna get in here with the SCANGRIPs. I'm gonna show you real time from my detailer's eye what exactly I'm seeing. Honestly, pretty thrilled. This area, I would say, is not the greatest. Look at the texture right here versus over here and even up here. Really a strong amount of orange peel. Now I'll be honest with you guys, I am not super picky on orange peel. I don't really feel the need to fully wet sand a car, nor do I believe it's the right thing for a car. Essentially, if you think about paint on a microscopic level, it has these peaks and has valleys. So it kind of goes up and down like that, creating that orange peel texture. If you're going into trying to wet sand that to create a no orange peel finish, you are taking off so much paint, leaving little to nothing to protect the actual vehicle. So I don't like to see that. Now vehicles like Koenigsegg that put just a massive amount of paint on these and then go through a full color sand, wet sand, all of that, that's a totally different story. But for, you know, average vehicles like this, I say average, I mean these are expensive vehicles nonetheless, but for a daily driver, I don't think it's the end of the world. The big thing is to make sure that the paint looks nice, that it's even, and then it has some protection. So other than a few things here and there on the paint, I'm really kind of impressed, to be perfectly honest with you guys. So let's jump in with the SCANGRIPs over here. We're gonna shut down these lights, have our single light sources, and go from there. All right, so let's take a look, kind of deep dive into this. We're gonna work around all these panels. I'm gonna show you any defects that I see and kind of walk through that. Now already right here, I'm seeing quite a bit of dust particulate in there. You can kind of see it on that bottom edge. This panel, in my opinion, kind of this lower section right here on the trunk lid, is not the clearest. So what I may actually do on this is come in and compound that section. It looks a little cloudy, and I think that's to do with the orange peel texture. Nonetheless, just wanted to mention that. Now, noticing a huge difference in color here as well, as actually even the metallic flake is slightly different, almost a little bit smaller here on the bumper to the actual trunk lid. I will tell you guys, this is extremely common between all manufacturers. I just had a GLS 580 Mercedes in here, the big bad boy, you know, expensive SUV from Mercedes. Very similar thing here. The plastic bumpers were slightly yellower than the pearl white paint on the actual vehicle. So kind of interesting, but look at that color difference. Kind of interesting to see. Now definitely on these lights, look at this. There's quite a bit of scratches and swirl marks. Nothing that I've seen that's out of the ordinary. I did have another Model Y Performance in. It was actually painted in the same pearl white as my color, and this back end had a ton of scratches. But this car so far, guys, I'm pretty thrilled. I don't see a ton of marks marring anything like that. I mean, honestly, the paint looks pretty good. I'm really kind of thinking in some areas I'm gonna have to spot paint correct a few maybe deeper scratches that I've seen over here, but I have yet to see sanding marks, which I'm thrilled to see and say. So yeah, looking very, very good. Even as we move along here, again, no real deep scratches, anything like that. I see a little bit of area I may have missed actually just washing there, if you guys are noticing that. A few little watermarks here and there. Again, nothing severe that I'm super concerned about. I also want to make the point, if you guys are seeing scratches and swirls at all on this, or if I come across them, I can't directly put that on Tesla. This car's had 1,000 miles on it, and it's been driven for the last 2 weeks. So I just want to make that clear. What I'm really looking for here is really bad sanding marks, any imperfections like dust nibs here. Now what's kind of interesting is on Kyle's Model S Plaid, they, I think, would have gone in and probably tried to sand that out and fix those. I'm almost preferring to see it like this. Does it stink that you have dust nibs? Absolutely. But I also don't love that because at the factory, what they did on Kyle's was basically really sand this. I'm seeing the same with Rivian, just so you guys know. It really sand this down, take all the orange peel out of it, not leaving a ton of paint there. So my preference would be to see it like this. So let's just continue to move around the vehicle here. Again, really not seeing a lot. I see a little bit of a scratch here. Again, that could have been from loading stuff in, nothing on Tesla there. Really, honestly, to be perfectly honest, guys, I'm quite surprised. Again, big color difference here. That's pretty common. Other than that, I mean, like there's a few scratches here. This charge port door, that doesn't seem necessarily normal. Again, I don't love the panel alignment here. Maybe over time. See how it actually kind of popped there? That's kind of weird. Yeah, so I think this may need to get kind of twisted out a little. It didn't do it that time. Nonetheless, let's keep moving down the side. Again, really happy with the paint here. Now, I'll be honest with you guys. I'm a huge Tesla fan. I think that they get a lot of flack for quality. I think at sometimes it's worthwhile, and I think other times people care a little too much. You know, my personal Tesla Model 3 was delivered very similar to this. Really only needed a light polish, maybe a spot compound here or two, but it wasn't bad. Kyle's Model S, whole nother ball game. I really struggled on that car. It was a massive pain just dealing with the softest paint I've ever dealt with. Tons of defects in it. Just kind of crazy to see that. But so far, I'm pretty happy with this Fremont Model Y. Again, we've got a little scratch here. Nothing that I'm worried about and can put on Tesla. I'm sure that we've got a few scratches here above the door, without a doubt. People getting in and out. Again, not one of those things we can put on Tesla. But we're focusing here on the lower panels. And yeah, just very, very surprised, to be perfectly honest. I've seen, you know, I actually got my start in detailing working with our local Audi, Porsche, Volkswagen store, and new cars would come in and they rarely looked this good, to be perfectly honest. As far as kind of defects on the paint and anything like that, I'm really, really happy to see that so far. Thought I just had saw something down here, maybe not. No, I don't think so. Let's just keep moving around the car. I'm going to point out anything that I see here. Again, I like that this panel is much better aligned. It does seem like the door is sticking slightly out here. Not the biggest concern, but again, just want to point that out while we're here. Really, really looking good, guys. Very, very happy. Let's come around to the front, and this had quite a bit of kind of bugs on it. And what's kind of concerning here is, so you can see some of those marks right there. What happens, especially because this paint is essentially naked, so it has no protection on it, came directly from Tesla to my friend, and he's been driving it around. There's no protection on this paint, so what happens with these bugs marks is they can actually stain the paint there. You can definitely see those pretty big. And what they physically do is eat away the top layer of the paint, so they kind of create these ripples. So what I'll probably do is lightly polish this. If the polish doesn't take it out, bump it up to slightly bit more compound, but these are pretty severe. Again, he's only been driving this for 2 weeks, so that's why it's so critical, in my opinion, to put either paint protection film on if you like it. I'm not a huge fan of it, or just ceramic coat the vehicle, because bugs like this, you're putting a sacrificial layer on there. It's not going to cause a ton of damage. Let's continue over here to the passenger side, seeing if I see pretty much anything. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not. Exactly what I want to see. Again, big variance here, front bumper to fender. Let's pull these lights around as well. Seeing very similar things to the back end. Noticing a lighter color here, a little bit darker. Is it the end of the world? I don't know. I do want to check the door jambs at some point as well and see how those look. But coming down the side here, again, looking pretty sharp here. I really don't love the panel misalignment here. That seems pretty far off. I mean, that's a good 1/8 of an inch or so, but it looks reasonably tight up here, maybe a little too tight up there. So I think maybe this panel needs to go a little, one of those. Yeah, so let's keep moving here. Now I did see, let me pull in my other one here, a little bit of scratching here. Now, this is, again, not one that I can put on Tesla, right? Because, you know, he's had people in and out of this car, so that could have easily been from that, especially with people not understanding how to use these, because they are kind of tricky. Now, I found one interesting mark right here. Now, what's kind of interesting with this is it seems very circular, so I'm wondering if they maybe did buff this area or something's happened there. Not exactly sure, but it doesn't look hazy like it's been buffed, but very strange because it's very circular as you kind of move this around. Now, kind of a weird texture here on the door handle. It seems kind of like shiny in areas and others, whereas the other ones seem a lot more consistent. So that back door handle, definitely a little bit different there. But I do think they did pretty decent alignment around here. Again, as we go down the side, guys, not seeing a ton of anything. There's a few little hairline scratches in there. Again, nothing to be putting on Tesla. We'll get those rectified with a nice polish on this, or maybe even spot compounding. We'll kind of see once we get into it. I'm very curious, and we're going to do that in part 2 of this video to see how this vehicle polishes up. But overall, not seeing a ton. Again, we had a little dent here. What I'm kind of thinking is that is actually a defect, because as I look at it, let me see if I can get this on cam. See right around there? I don't see any scratches, which is pretty typical with kind of dents, right? So if you were to hit this, there would likely be some scratching, marring around there. Also don't see anything on the plastic trim. That could be a defect from Tesla, actually, not exactly sure. But yeah, just really kind of thrilled with this. Let's, I'm gonna reset this up. We're gonna look at the hood and kind of the upper portions above this body line here and kind of check how it's looking up there. All right, so I actually found a little bit of kind of a rotary polishing mark here. So actually the first thing we've seen from Tesla. It may be a little hard to pick up, but what I want you guys to look at, so notice on this paint here, how when you look directly at the light source, there's nothing around it. And then look at this one. Let me try and get the angle. See how there's that kind of streaky haziness above and below it? That's a little bit of rotary polishing, so they've actually polished that. Now these black panels here do not look the greatest either. These can be quite a bear to even get a machine in there to polish those, but definitely wanted to point those out. Let's come back here, because I did see this panel definitely has a few little minor scratches in it. Again, can't necessarily put that on Tesla, just showing what this paint has on it. And there also is some up here as well, but nothing that is too severe. Let's get this turned around. Let's look at the hood. Hoods often get pretty abused as far as polishing because people always are looking at that. So let's come over here, check out how that's looking. And honestly, same with the rest of the car. Pretty darn nice. That's really what I want to see. Not a ton of work going on here. Let's check out this mirror actually while we're at it to see if they've done similar over here. And it does not seem like it. No polishing residue. Again, that kind of black piece not looking super nice there, but the mirror actually looks nice and clear. So that's really, really good to see. Now the driver's side, definitely a few little scratches here, but nothing too bad at all. Guys, I got to be perfectly honest with you. I haven't seen a new car come in this condition in a long time. Even from the kind of big boy manufacturers, Audi, Porsche, Lamborghini, you name it. I'm honestly pretty impressed with how the actual paint looks on it. All right, so I'm actually filming this outro after I finish the entire detail on the Model Y. Now, in general, I would say I was pretty impressed with the paint quality on this vehicle. Now, a little bit of variance here and there with the paint readings, pretty common to what I see. What I really like to see is there was not a ton of sanding marks, not a lot of rotary buffing marks on the vehicle. So from a detailer's perspective, really like seeing that. I think it's kind of interesting to note that Tesla on this specific Model Y performance was not doing a lot of aftercare on it. So denibbing and sanding and doing all of that. Whereas compared to Kyle's Model S Plaid that just had stuff everywhere. Really kind of interesting. I'd be curious to look at a black Model Y and see how that looks compared to Model S. Nonetheless, I think it was pretty good. There was a few areas, especially on that passenger rear quarter panel, which was actually missing paint that I did not like to see at all. I was able to touch that up with some exact match touch-up paint, and it looks pretty awesome, but I really don't want to see that on these cars. As far as panel alignment, I think they've gotten a lot better and made really good strides to get these cars kind of put together. Now, again, there were a few areas that were a little kind of off. Is it the end of the world? No. I would say in general, this car came in better than a lot of new cars do. So pretty impressed with that. Again, the exception of the missing paint in that one area. Hope you guys really enjoyed this video and really kind of want to know, would you be happy with this Model Y performance if you were taking delivery of it? Thanks so much for joining us for another out of spec detailing video.